She said, "You're just a background character. Stop pretending you're important." So I faded quietly into the background, letting her think she'd won, while I documented every flirt, every secret meetup, every deleted text, and when I finally sent the entire folder to her main character, the man she swore was just a friend, she realized background characters can still end the whole movie. I, 34 am, never thought I'd become invisible in my own marriage, but that's exactly what happened over the course of 18 months. Looking back now, I can see the slow fade happening, like watching a photograph left too long in the sun. The colors bleeding out bit by bit until you're left with something unrecognizable. My wife worked in marketing at a tech startup downtown. I worked from home as a software contractor, which meant I kept irregular hours and was often around the house when she thought I wasn't paying attention. That's how it started, really. Me being there when I shouldn't have been, hearing things I wasn't supposed to hear, noticing patterns that didn't quite add up. The first real crack appeared on a Tuesday evening in March. She came home later than usual, cheeks flushed, talking rapidly about some new campaign they were launching. She mentioned a coworker's name 3 times in the first 5 minutes. I asked about him casually, and she waved it off, said he was just someone on her team, nothing important. But her phone buzzed twice during dinner, and both times she angled it away from me before checking. I'm not naturally suspicious. I'd like to think I'm trusting to a fault, actually. But something in my gut twisted that night, and I couldn't shake it. The next morning, I noticed she'd changed her phone passcode. She did it while making coffee, thinking I was in the shower. I watched through the crack in the bathroom door as she carefully input the new numbers, then tested it twice to make sure it worked. That's when I started paying attention. Over the next few weeks, the pattern became clearer. Late nights at the office that smelled suspiciously like cologne when she got home. Weekend work emergencies that required her immediate presence. A new wardrobe that she claimed was for professional development. She started going to the gym at odd hours, coming back looking less like she'd worked out and more like she'd been somewhere else entirely. I confronted her once, gently, asking if everything was okay between us. She laughed it off, said I was being paranoid, that work was just stressful and she needed space to handle it. I accepted that explanation because I wanted to believe it, because the alternative was too painful to consider. Then came the night that changed everything. It was late April, and she'd been on her phone for an hour straight, smiling at the screen in a way she hadn't smiled at me in months. I asked who she was texting, and that's when she looked up at me with something cold in her eyes, something I'd never seen before. She told me I was being clingy, that I was always hovering, always questioning, always making everything about me. She said I needed to understand that the world didn't revolve around me, that I was just a background character in the grand scheme of things, and I should stop pretending I was important. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stood there in our living room, the room where we'd celebrated anniversaries and planned our future, and I felt something inside me crystallize into something hard and cold. She went back to her phone, dismissing me entirely, and I realized she genuinely believed what she'd said. To her, I had become scenery, wallpaper, something to ignore while the real story happened elsewhere. I didn't argue, didn't fight back. I just nodded slowly and went to my office. That night, I made a decision. If she wanted me to be a background character, then that's exactly what I'd become. But background characters see everything. They're in every scene, watching, observing, noting every detail that the main characters miss in their self-absorbed drama. I started with her laptop. She'd gotten careless about logging out of her accounts on the home computer, probably because she assumed I was too unimportant to bother checking. Her email was a goldmine. Months of correspondence with him, the coworker whose name I now knew by heart. Flirty messages that escalated into explicit ones. Plans for meetups disguised as work lunches. Hotel receipts forwarded to her personal email. I created a dedicated folder on an encrypted cloud drive. Screenshot after screenshot, sorted by date, categorized by content type. I was methodical about it, almost clinical. Every time she claimed to be working late, I'd check the metadata on her photos from that day. The locations never matched her office. Every time she said she was at the gym, I'd note the timestamps on her messages with him. They always aligned. I installed a recovery app on our shared tablet, the one she occasionally used for work presentations. She didn't know that deleted messages could be retrieved, that nothing is ever truly gone in the digital age. Every conversation she erased thinking she'd covered her tracks came flooding back to me. I documented everything with timestamps and context notes. The next few months were surreal. I maintained the facade of normal married life while quietly building my case. I cooked dinner, asked about her day, smiled when appropriate. She seemed relieved that I'd stopped being clingy, that I'd accepted my role as background character. She got bolder, more careless, started taking calls with him in the house, thinking I was too absorbed in my work to notice. I heard every word through the walls, recorded every call I could. In June, I followed her one Saturday when she said she was meeting her sister for lunch. She drove to a hotel on the east side of town, parked in the back lot, and met him at a side entrance. They kissed before going inside, and I captured it all on my phone from across the street. 2 hours later, they emerged looking disheveled and satisfied. I got those photos too. The hardest part wasn't the evidence gathering. It was pretending not to care, going to bed next to her every night knowing where she'd been that afternoon, listening to her talk about her day, knowing that every word was built on lies. But I kept my face neutral, my responses bland, my presence forgettable. Just a background character doing background character things. I learned his name was what mattered to her. I learned he was single, successful, everything she apparently thought I wasn't. I learned they'd been planning a future together, discussing what it would be like when she finally left me. They talked about it like it was inevitable, like I was just an obstacle to be removed when the timing was right. What she didn't know was that he had someone else in his life too. A girlfriend of 3 years who worked remotely from another state. I found her through his social media, though he was careful not to post much. She existed in the background of his life, just like I existed in the background of my wife's. We were both scenery to their grand romance. By September, I had everything I needed. 6 months of documented infidelity, crystal clear and undeniable. Text messages where they discussed me with casual contempt. Photos and videos from their various meetups. Financial records showing hotel bookings and expensive dinners. A complete timeline of their relationship from the first flirtatious message to their most recent plans. I sat in my office one evening, looking at the folder I'd compiled, and felt a strange sense of calm. My wife was in the living room, on the phone with him, laughing at something he said. She thought I couldn't hear her. She thought I didn't matter enough to pay attention. I opened a new email and addressed it to his girlfriend. I'd found her email through some basic internet research, confirmed it was her through cross-referencing with other sources. I attached the complete folder, every single file organized and labeled. I wrote a brief message explaining who I was, that I thought she deserved to know the truth, and that I was sorry she had to find out this way. Then I sent it. I sat back and waited. The email went through at 8:37 p.m. on a Thursday. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew the story was about to change dramatically. Update 1. The response came faster than I expected. His girlfriend called him at 9:15 p.m. I know because my wife's phone rang seconds later, his name flashing on the screen. She answered with her usual flirty tone, but I heard it shift immediately to confusion, then panic. She took the call into the bedroom and closed the door, but our house wasn't that big. I heard her voice rising, heard her asking what he was talking about, heard the desperation creeping in. The call lasted 20 minutes. When she emerged, her face was pale, her hands shaking. She asked me if I'd done something. Her voice was tight, controlled, but I could see the fear underneath. I looked up from my laptop and asked what she meant, keeping my tone perfectly neutral. She said someone had sent information to someone, that there was a misunderstanding, that things were being blown out of proportion. I told her I didn't know what she was talking about. Asked if everything was okay. She stared at me for a long moment, and I watched her trying to calculate whether I was really that oblivious or if I was playing a game she hadn't anticipated. She couldn't reconcile the possibility that her background character had agency, had been watching all along. She said she needed to go out, that there was an emergency she had to handle. I nodded and told her to be safe. She grabbed her keys and left without another word. I tracked her phone through the family sharing feature she'd forgotten we had set up. She drove straight to his apartment across town. She stayed there for 3 hours. I imagined them in crisis mode, trying to figure out how much damage had been done, whether they could salvage anything. What they didn't know was that his girlfriend had already forwarded my email to several people. His boss, for one, because workplace relationships were forbidden at his company. Her family, because she wanted them to know why she was ending a 3-year relationship. A few mutual friends, because she was hurt and angry and wanted people to understand what had been done to her. The fallout was spectacular. My wife came home after midnight. She looked destroyed. Makeup smeared, eyes red, moving like someone in shock. She went straight to bed without speaking to me. I stayed in my office, monitoring the situation through various social media channels. His girlfriend had gone scorched earth, posting cryptic messages about betrayal and lies. People were commenting, asking questions, sharing their own stories. The next morning, my wife didn't go to work. She stayed in bed until noon, her phone buzzing constantly with messages she didn't answer. When she finally emerged, she looked at me differently, like she was seeing me for the first time, reassessing everything she thought she knew. She asked me directly if I'd sent the information. I could have lied, could have maintained the innocent act, but I was tired of performing. So I told her yes. I told her I'd been watching for months, that I'd documented everything, that I knew about every lie, every meetup, every deleted message. I told her that when she called me a background character, she'd made a critical error. She'd assumed being in the background meant being unimportant, when really it just meant being in position to see everything. She tried to get angry, tried to accuse me of violating her privacy, of being controlling and obsessive. But the words fell flat because we both knew the truth. She destroyed our marriage long before I'd started gathering evidence. I'd just been the one to make sure everyone else knew about it too. She demanded to know why I'd sent it to his girlfriend instead of confronting her directly. I told her because his girlfriend deserved to know, just like I deserved to know. Because we were both background characters in their story, and it was time we stopped accepting that role. Update 2. The next week was chaos. My wife's company launched an internal investigation after his girlfriend's email reached the right people. Apparently, they'd been using company time and resources for their affair, booking conference rooms for private meetings, using company credit cards for their hotel stays. Both of them were placed on administrative leave pending review. My wife oscillated between rage and desperation. She tried apologizing, explaining, justifying. She said she'd felt trapped in our marriage, that she'd needed excitement, that it wasn't really about me. Then she'd switch and accuse me of ruining her life, of being vindictive and cruel. I listened to all of it with the same neutral expression I'd worn for months. I consulted with a divorce attorney, showed him my documentation. He actually smiled, said it was one of the most comprehensive cases he'd seen. We filed papers on a Wednesday afternoon. My wife was served at her parents' house, where she'd been staying since the truth came out. Her family called me. Her mother cried, said she didn't understand how things had gotten so bad. Her father was quieter, but I could hear the disappointment in his voice, and I knew it wasn't directed at me. I told them I was sorry they were caught in the middle, that I'd always respected them, but I couldn't stay in a marriage where I was treated as insignificant. His girlfriend reached out to me through email. She thanked me for sending the evidence, said she'd been sensing something was wrong, but had convinced herself she was paranoid. We exchanged a few messages, two people who'd been made to feel crazy while our partners rewrote reality around us. She was moving back to her home state, starting over. I told her I hoped she found something better. My wife tried to reconcile. She showed up at the house one evening, said she'd ended things with him completely, that she wanted to fix our marriage. She cried, told me she loved me, that she'd made a terrible mistake. I asked her if she remembered calling me a background character, telling me I was pretending to be important. She said she'd been cruel, that she hadn't meant it. But we both knew she had. She'd meant every word. She'd just never expected the background character to have a story of his own. The divorce moved quickly. She didn't contest anything. Her lawyer advised cooperation given the evidence I had. We split assets fairly, no alimony for either side. She wanted it done quietly, wanted to minimize further damage to her reputation. I agreed because I had no interest in dragging it out. His life imploded more dramatically than hers. He lost his job after the investigation concluded. His professional network, carefully cultivated over years, evaporated when word spread about the affair. His girlfriend's family had connections in their industry, and they made sure people knew what kind of person he was. Last I heard, he'd moved to another city, trying to rebuild from scratch. My wife eventually got her job back after a formal reprimand, but her trajectory there was finished. The promotion she'd been working toward went to someone else. Colleagues who'd been friendly kept their distance. She'd gone from rising star to cautionary tale. Update 3. It's been 4 months since the divorce finalized. I moved to a different part of the city, found a better apartment with more natural light. Started therapy to work through everything. Not because I was broken, but because I wanted to understand how I'd let myself become invisible in my own life. My therapist said something interesting in one of our sessions. She said that background characters in stories are often the most honest ones, the ones who see clearly because they're not blinded by their own narrative. The main characters are so convinced of their importance, so absorbed in their drama, that they miss the obvious. They underestimate everyone around them. I've thought a lot about that. About how my wife's biggest mistake wasn't the affair itself, but the contempt. If she'd respected me enough to be honest, to end things cleanly, maybe we could have parted as friends. But she'd looked at me and seen someone too insignificant to warrant honesty, too unimportant to deserve basic respect. She'd forgotten that background characters are witnesses. We're in every scene, watching the main characters make their choices, seeing the consequences pile up. And when the story finally reaches its climax, we're the ones who know exactly what happened and why. I ran into her once, at a coffee shop near our old neighborhood. She looked tired, older somehow. She saw me and hesitated, clearly unsure whether to approach. I gave her a small nod, acknowledgement without engagement, and turned back to my laptop. She left a few minutes later. I don't hate her. Somewhere in the wreckage of what we had, I found something like understanding. She'd wanted to be the protagonist of some grand romance, wanted to feel special and desired and important. She'd gotten lost in that fantasy, convinced herself that her feelings justified her actions, that the supporting characters in her story didn't have feelings that mattered. The irony is that in trying to make herself the main character, she'd reduced herself to a cliché. Another person who destroyed something real for something temporary, who traded stability for excitement, and found that excitement burns out fast when it's built on lies. I'm doing better now. Dating casually, nothing serious yet. I'm not in a hurry. I've reconnected with friends I'd neglected, started taking better care of myself. My work is going well, better than it has in years. Turns out I'm more productive when I'm not spending emotional energy on someone who sees me as scenery. Sometimes I wonder if she understands what she lost. Not the marriage itself, but the person I was to her before she decided I was insignificant. I was someone who would have supported her through anything, who'd loved her enough to overlook a lot of flaws, who'd built a life around making her happy. But you can't love someone who sees you as a background character. You can't build a partnership with someone who thinks you're just set dressing in their story. And you can't fix someone who's convinced that their narrative matters more than your humanity. I learned that I'm not a background character. None of us are. We're all protagonists of our own stories. And the people who try to reduce us to supporting roles in theirs are the ones who end up alone when the credits roll. My wife wanted a story where she was the star, where she got to have everything she wanted without consequences. What she got instead was a harsh lesson about respecting the people around you, about understanding that everyone's story matters, that everyone has agency. Background characters can end the movie. We just do it quietly, methodically, without the dramatic flair the main characters expect. We document, we wait, we act at precisely the right moment. And when the story falls apart, we're the ones left standing, ready to start our own narrative. She thought she'd won when I stopped fighting her, when I faded into the background. She thought my silence was surrender, but it was strategy. It was me giving her enough rope to hang herself while I built my case, gathered my evidence, prepared my exit. The look on her face when she realized what I'd done, that's something I'll never forget. Pure shock that the person she'd dismissed as insignificant had orchestrated her downfall so completely. That the background character she'd stopped noticing had been the most dangerous person in the room all along. I'm not proud of the revenge, but I'm not ashamed either. Sometimes the only way to stop being invisible is to prove that you were watching the whole time, that you mattered enough to yourself to refuse to accept how they saw you. She called me a background character. So I showed her what happens when background characters decide they're tired of playing supporting roles in someone else's story. We write our own endings. And sometimes, those endings involve making sure the main character finally understands that their actions have consequences, that the people they hurt are real, and that being important to yourself is the only kind of importance that actually matters. I'm the protagonist of my own life now, and my story is just beginning. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with friends or family who might enjoy it too. Your support means a lot. And if you have any thoughts, questions, or story ideas, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next story.